Um, I have been a counselor here at Iowa for about the past 5 years, and I've been in the field for about 10 years. Um, I'm I'm also a parent, and this is an emotional topic for me as well. So if I get choked up, just know that I'm fine, and you don't have to take care of me. I'll start with a little bit of information about University Counseling Service. So we are the primary mental health service on campus. We're not the only, but we're the biggest. Our services are free to your students. And actually what that really means is your students have already paid for our services and their student fees. And so if your students ever utilize University Counseling Service, it will not cost them another dime. And so we're available to any student that's currently attending Iowa. And we're open during the summers, and we're open over all the breaks, and your student doesn't have to be enrolled in classes to see us. For first year students, they are eligible for our services starting day one of class. So if they haven't yet been a student, once the first day of classes start, then they're eligible to be students all the way until they graduate, even over summers when they're not enrolled in classes. So keep that in mind. So at the University Counseling Service, we provide brief individual counseling, which is where a student can meet with their counselor, usually anywhere between about 3 and 8 sessions. And that's not a hard and fast limit, but usually that's the range within which people work. We also do group counseling, and group counseling is really cool because it's more of a longer term option in that group counseling goes all semester long, and group meetings are about an hour and a half long, and there's 2 therapists leading every group. And groups are usually somewhere between like 5, 6, 7, 8 students in each group. So there's a lot of attention paid to each student in those groups. And a student can be in group counseling semester after semester after semester after semester if they want to be. So it's a really good place for a student that wants to get connected and stay connected with the counseling service. Sometimes actually really often we have students that come into our office and they know that they want individual counseling, but they don't want there to be any kind of session limit, or maybe they've already had a counselor for a long time, and now that they're changing locations, changing states in some cases, they need to find a new counselor. They want to find a new counselor. And so part of what we do is give good referrals to private counselors in the community, and we keep our own community referral list that we've vetted the counselors. And if we ever hear of students having negative interactions with counselors, we take them off of our referral list. So it's a more streamlined way to get students connected with longer term providers, if that's what they're looking for. We are also here to consult with the whole university community. So we regularly have staff and faculty and TAs contacting us saying, hey, I'm worried about this student, I've got this going on. Or there'll be students in the dorm saying, hey, I'm worried about this person that lives on my floor. Or RAs will contact us. And also, like, we get phone calls from parents routinely saying, hey, my kid's got this and this going on. I don't know what to do. What should I do to help them? What should I say? And we help do that problem solving with parents all the time. So don't forget about us if things start to get stressful with you and your student. So we have multiple offices. Our main office is in the West Lawn building, which is the same building as Student Health. We also have offices in the Old Capitol Town Center, which is like the Old Capitol Mall, downtown Iowa City. There's counselors in the residence halls that only students who live in the residence halls can go see. There's a counselor in the College of Business. There's a counselor in the College of Law. There's a counselor in the College of Dentistry. There are a couple of counselors in athletics, 2 or 3 counselors. And our staff tends to grow. So students have pretty good access to us. And most of the time there's little to no wait to get in. Once we get like pretty deep into the semester, halfway or longer, sometimes, or we usually get on a wait list. And for us, that looks like somewhere between like a week or 2 weeks that a student would have to wait to start counseling. And that might sound like a lot if you're expecting to get in immediately, but compared to trying to get in with a private provider, that actually tends to be really fast. I always tell students and parents who are considering if university counseling service is for them, I like to tell everyone that no concern is too big and no concern is too small. I've heard so many students say, oh yeah, the stuff going on in my life is way too big. It wouldn't be if I did brief counseling, we would barely scratch the surface. And if I did group counseling, I'd freak everybody out. And to that I say, you know what? You might actually really be surprised at what everyone else in the world has gone through and how much they might be able to connect with what you've gone through. And if someone feels like they have a big concern, maybe the whole thing won't get solved in 3 to 8 sessions or one round of group counseling, but maybe they start to feel around the edges of it, or maybe they actually like get a better perspective on it, or maybe they make a plan for how they're going to address it. Another thing that's common is for students to start with brief counseling with us, and then part of their treatment plan is to find a good counselor in the community that they can just continue working with. So that can be a really good plan for someone who feels like their concern is really big. And then I hear other students and families say, well, my concern's too small. I don't want to take up time. I don't want to take a space from somebody else. And to them, I say, you paid the same student fees as everybody else. So this place is just as much for you as it is for anybody else. If you feel like you have a small concern, then come in, and maybe it'll just not take very long to work through. And if that's cool, then that's a really good use of time. Okay, so we are going to pivot a little bit, and I'm going to ask y'all to use the chat feature. I'm going to pull it up on my screen as well. Okay, so I see, are students able to do counseling over breaks via telemedicine if they are in a different state at that time? So that's a really great question. That depends on the state, because there's licensing laws having to do with practicing across state lines. Due to the pandemic, many states have opened their borders and said, yep, therapists can practice across state lines. Many did not do that. Some that did are already like stopping that now, that, you know, that's gone on for more than a year, and they were really gracious, and that's starting to slow down. As of right now, we can still, like, the main state that we see the most, the main state beyond Iowa that we see the most students from is Illinois by far. And we're still able to work with students who are in Illinois. The main rule there is that they have to just establish their care while they're in the state of Iowa, and then they can have they can continue to meet with their counselor when they're in Illinois. So that's on a state-by-state basis, and that's as long as the governors continue to renew the ability to do that. And we'll see if legislation passes to break down barriers between state lines. So that's a really good question. Okay, so I'm gonna ask y'all a question now, and we'll be like slightly interactive as we go. But at this point, if we were, normally this presentation would be in an auditorium, and there'd be 50, 60, 70, 80 parents in there, and you know, everybody'd be kind of looking around nervously, and there'd be the chatterboxes, and there'd be the people that are just kind of anxiously to themselves. And I would ask, well, so for how many of you is this your first child leaving home? And usually, I think at least half the people raise their hand. They're like, yep, first time. And then I say, second time you've sent someone out into the world? A bunch more. Third time? Then I ask, only? So there are some, you know, for some folks, this is the first time that they have a child leaving the home. Some of you in this presentation have done this before, which might make it easier and it might not. And for some of you, this is your only child, and this is the only time that you'll go through this, which has enough, you know, its own layer of experience. So I'm aware of that as we go through this. And as I go through this talk, I'll refer to your student as your kid. This is the only time in the whole year that I call students kids. I just consider them adults, young adults, but I'm well aware that I'm speaking to a room full of parents. So I know that they will forever be your kids. So in this talk only, I will refer to your student as your kid and nowhere else. I know that in this room, there are biological parents, foster parents, grandparents, step parents, guardians, family friends, and really anyone else who cares about these kids. And to all of you, I say congratulations on getting your kids to this point. It is not easy. Maybe you had a fun, smooth, easy road to this point and everything's awesome. If that's the case, then that's great and I love it. And for other folks, it's like completely out of breath, sweaty, hot mess, just like can't believe that I got my kid through high school. I'm can't believe that they're going to college. This is awesome. This is incredible. Let's get them out of the house. So, and everything in between. So I'm aware of those things also. So congratulations on getting your kids to this point. In fall of 2019, about 19.6 million students were expected to attend American colleges and universities. And so as parents, you are not alone. Millions have done it before you, and millions will do it after you. And if they can do it, you can do it. This talk is not about your students specifically, though. This is about your transition. So when you think about what it might be like, not necessarily just for your student, but also for you and your family and your life, for when your student leaves, go ahead and type in the chat, like, what comes up for you when you think about what this transition might mean for you. So for some, it might mean like you're gonna have to get to know your spouse again because you both have had a common focus, which might not have been each other. You might have to think like how you're going to fill your time if you're not going to a million activities. You might have to, like, maybe you used to see your friend group at your child activities and you're going to have to figure out how to stay connected with the friend group. Yeah, so Paula said sadness. What else? What else comes up for you all when you think about this transition of your kids moving on to the next step in their education? Yep. Worried about your daughter's safety? I will. If my daughter goes to college, I'll worry about that. Deb said, this is our only child. I'm proud and excited for him, which makes me happy. I will miss him. Absolutely. Both excitement and concern. So many unknowns. Absolutely. Yeah, having a quiet house. You bet. You know, like, so I mentioned that a lot of times parents used to see their friend groups at their child activities, and a lot of your social life might have revolved around your kids' activities. And it's like, well, how are we going to see all these people? Like, I've been to baseball games. I have a now 21-year-old stepson who played baseball growing up forever, and I attended all of his baseball games, as many as I possibly could. And I know the deal. It was like everybody got there early and everybody already knew where they were sitting, and it was like the same crowd that was at everything. And once all the kids graduated, what bound people together? And I've heard of those types of friend groups who have still made efforts to get together, and they get together like every other week or like once a month so that they can still hang out, and they just keep that social aspect going for themselves. What else will be different when your child leaves the house? Somebody said quieter. Some people might be like, oh, I can't wait for the quiet. And then for other people, silence means the absence of something. And that can be really hard. And go ahead and type in the chat, like, what else you think this might mean. Yeah, that you feel like you can't help and you've always been there, and now you're not in the same way, which we'll address later. That you can, Paula, you can still help them out. It just won't be exactly in the same way, which we'll talk more. Yep, loss of control, feeling like you're not needed. Yep, we're going to address that. Absolutely. If you know, something that can happen is like an older child leaves, and sometimes that leaves just one child in the home, and then that puts a lot more focus on that child, and they might want that, they might not want that. There's a chance that the kids that are left at home were kind of enjoying your division of attention, and now like more attention will be on them. So that might be a new adjustment. Any children that are still in the home after the older one leaves, they might miss the older sibling and they might not know how to say it. And you might notice them being crabby or acting out or starting to kind of test boundaries or kind of acting out of character. I just encourage you to keep that in mind, that there's a chance that they're having feelings that they are struggling to identify. And it might be that they miss their older sibling and they're struggling with this transition also. So, you know, maybe don't bring the hammer down on them. Maybe open up conversation about it. I hear a lot of parents say, the house is going to be cleaner. Okay, that's awesome. I've heard people say, my vacuum lines will stay. That'll be incredible. Absolutely. You might have one less driver. Like maybe your child that's leaving was able to help drive the younger kids places, things like that. Maybe you had a kid that actually did chores around the house, and if you did, then go ahead and email me privately and tell me how you did that, because that's incredible. But if that kid's leaving, then who's going to start to do their chores? It might be you, and if it's not, then it might be a younger sibling, and they might have feelings about that. I'm curious, what questions do you have, and what are your biggest worries? Go ahead and type that in the Q&A. What questions do you have about coming to college and Iowa City, and what are your biggest worries? I also just put my university email in the chat section in case anybody has, like, after this talk, if folks want to reach out to me and ask questions or wonder how any of the process works, like, feel free to engage with me via email. And that way, it's a really easy way to get a hold of me. So someone says, safety for a student who is LGBT. I can say in Iowa, like, Iowa City is the place to be. For a student who's LGBT, there's a wonderful, strong, vibrant LGBT community in Iowa City. It's incredible. That's not to, like, overlook any concerns that we all know are present anywhere in the world. But Iowa City is, I think, in Iowa, in my opinion, is the most open place to be. It's absolutely public knowledge. The director of the university counseling service identifies as a gay man, and we have multiple staff members who identify as LGBT. How to encourage her to regularly communicate with us. I'm definitely going to talk about that. Procrastinator, will he be successful in keeping up? Yep, that might be a big old gut punch at first, and then you might have to learn from there. That's absolutely what happened to me. I was totally a procrastinator and had to figure it out real fast when I came to college. Distance from home, are they ready to make all the adult decisions? That's a wonderful question. We're gonna address that. How to help with homesickness when I'm missing my kid at the same time. Wonderful. I'm going to talk about that. How long do you suggest they stay at school before coming home for the first time? Love that question. We're definitely going to talk about that. Managing time and finances, COVID and safety issues. Yes, absolutely. Okay. And the university is taking all of the COVID things seriously, and I think we'll be very responsive if things start to go sideways. Right now, our numbers are very low in Iowa City, and obviously everybody's interested to see what's going to happen when all of the students return to Iowa City and everyone's living in the dorms and classes resume. I think that I was going to take that very seriously. Alcohol and drugs, yes, those are things that we will talk about further. Managing the workload, ADHD and transition. Okay, so I've seen ADHD a couple of times now already. Let me just put in a little plug. This is just a coincidence. I happen to run a support group for students who have ADHD, and it's awesome. And the students that are in it are fantastic, and they're very supportive of each other. So if your student is diagnosed with ADHD, I strongly suggest that you help them to register with Student Disability Services to get any accommodations that might be useful, because it's really awesome. It goes a long way, and they do not have to be registered with SDS to take part in the support group that I run. All they would have to do would be to email me, and you all have my email address. Just email me and say, hey, I'm interested in being in the ADHD support group, and then I will send them all the information that they need to know. So that's just a little aside about ADHD. Okay, so good. A lot of those questions are going to be answered as we move forward. You know, a lot of times a lot of times parents ask, like, is my kid safe? Like, is Iowa City safe? Um, you all know very well, no place is perfectly safe. I will say that it takes time to develop a feeling of safety and to not expect to feel it right away. But you all don't stop being their parents, and so you can continue to guide them as you did in high school. Um, I strongly encourage that you encourage your kids to get out and about and learn the campus. The thing that will probably be the most helpful for them is to develop a sense of community, to learn the community. Like, whenever you drop them off, which we'll talk about drop off, like, I want you to get out and about and see all the things and go to restaurants and take tours and just drive around and see where things are and locate the closest necessity for everything. And then encourage them to make friends and go out and do things, which we'll talk more about later also. Oh, so shoot, I usually have, see, this is where my rust is going to show. I usually have this ready. I'm going to Google something real quick. I'm going to put it in the chat. So there is a quick guide for helping students. All right, here we go. I'm going to put this in the chat. That's a link to this quick guide for helping students. Now, this has links to all of the important folks on campus. Go ahead and like check this out. This will say, if this thing is happening with your child, call this person. If this happens, call this person. If you're worried about this, call this person. Because we all know that University of Iowa is an enormous institution. There's 33,000 students here, and it's gigantic. So here's the link again. I'll put my email again. Oh, sorry, it's Kyle Dash. There we go. Okay, that's the correct email address. Yeah. Okay, Kyle-Votrovic@uio.edu, and then I put the link in there. Paula, you can email me directly if you want, if you can't see links that are coming up. So I really encourage you to check out this quick guide for helping students. It's got a lot of really good information, tells you who to call in any given scenario. I will also tell you that the UCS, University Counseling Service, is a great place to call if you don't know where to start, because we have a no wrong door policy, and our front desk staff is just awesome, and most of them have worked for the university for a long time. So if you call the university or if you call the UCS and say, hey, my kid's going through this and this, like, who do I talk to? They're not going to say, that's not us, and hang up. They're going to say, oh, hold on a second, let me find out. And they're going to dig, and they're going to find the office that you need to call, and they're going to give you the phone number, and they're just awesome. Our front desk staff is great. So call our phone number if you don't know where else to go. Okay. Okay, so that's the quick guide for helping parents. So a question that I often hear is, how often do you plan to communicate? All right, so a question that I was asked is, how often do you plan to communicate with your kids when they're at college? And how to do that. So, you know, there's text and FaceTime and Skype and calling on the phone and all kinds of things. Going with the flow is fine, but I also advise that you have a conversation with your student ahead of time. So what actually ends up happening is probably going to change from the plan, but the plan is a good anchor point. You don't want to send your kid off to college and you each have a different set of assumptions of how it's going to be. That you're like, I'm sure they'll call and check in with me every day, and they're like, all right, I'm not going to see mom and dad till Thanksgiving. Like, that's a non-starter. That's not going to be a good recipe for you all. So definitely have a conversation about that before they leave. I also encourage you to don't force them to agree with your plan, or you're going to be setting everyone up for failure. So this plan that you have needs to be an actual agreement and collaboration, because none of you really know exactly what life is going to be like when they go to college. And so if you were to say, I want you to call me every night at 8, well, first of all, life might be wild and it might not be that easy for them to call you every night at 8, or maybe they're a group that they have for one of their classes wants to meet at the library from 7:30 to 9:30 and 8 o'clock's right in the middle of that, or lots of other different scenarios. And so that doesn't happen, and then you're upset with them because you're worried and you wanted to check in. So I really encourage you to try to set reasonable boundaries and recognize that that's going to be a trial run for how you actually end up doing it throughout the semester and throughout the year. So be flexible around those things. Also keep in mind, there is no privacy in the dorms and your kid is trying to look cool. So maybe they have a roommate that they already know, or maybe they're paired with a random like I was, and there's nowhere for them to go to like have privacy. And if they have the room to themselves, they don't know when their roommate's coming home. Maybe your kids will have more private rooms due to COVID. That's a double-edged sword. In some ways that's been really cool, and in other ways it's been more isolating. But historically, there's not much privacy in the dorms. And so some of the kids think they're clever and they'll go to like the stairwell to like have a private conversation with their mom or their dad. And then they just join the 7 or 8 other kids that are in the stairwell trying to have a private conversation with their mom and their dad. And if you're expecting your kid to call at a certain day at a certain time, circumstances might not be right at that time. There could be somebody around that your kid doesn't feel comfortable being open about. And the thing is, you want to hear the real story. You don't want to hear them trying to put on their cool face in front of people that they are trying to impress. You want to get the real deal. And so I really encourage you to be open to whenever they're able to call, and even encourage them to do that. Say, like, you're probably going to hear from your students when they're walking between classes or random times when there's nothing going on in their lives that nobody could anticipate. My mom, so my agreement with my mom when I went to college at Iowa 20 years ago, I graduated in 2001, and so I went to Iowa in 2001. I was a freshman, and the deal that I made with my mom is that I would call to check in with her every Sunday, at some point Sunday. And if it was getting to be like 7, 8, 9 o'clock and I hadn't called her, I started being like, oh, I better go call her because I know she's about to call me. So that tends to work for folks pretty well. Now, you all get to decide what's right for you, and maybe you talk to your kids way more often than that, and maybe you talk to your kids way less often than that. That's totally cool. So just at least have a conversation so that you're on a similar page, so that you're not so divergent in what your expectations are that it becomes a problem in the future. Now, for the parents that are really itchy to talk to their kids, there's a phenomenon that happens that if you talk to your kid too often, not enough stuff happens between calls. And then the calls get really stale and they turn into just a boring checklist, like, what'd you have for breakfast? What'd you have for lunch? Who'd you spend time with? What class did you have today? And it's like, we as parents sometimes just want to hold on, and that's our feeling of connection, but we're actually kind of like weakening the quality of the connection. So just consider the idea of letting some life happen in between phone calls so that maybe your kid will be excited to talk to you. Like, it'd be really neat if they had some things that they were excited to tell you. And it might take a few days or a week for them to generate some things to happen in their life that they're like, oh, Mom, listen to this. Oh, Dad, you can't even believe what happened. Like, they're going to see some funny and wild and crazy stuff in Iowa City. Just like, maybe you all did when you were younger too. Whether or not you went to college, like, once you left home, you just saw stuff and you had experiences. Like, be open to hearing about that for your kids. Okay, so I'm going to pivot to move-in day. So I just want to prep you. Move-in day will probably be super stressful. Move-in day is 100% of the time either super hot and humid and sticky and unbearable, or it's pouring rain, okay? It's horrible. There's nowhere to park. It's total chaos. The university's done a wonderful job of organizing everything, and you show up at this day on this time, and you show up on this day at this time, and it's supposed to go all orderly, but it never does. It's always like mass chaos, and there's your kids on the 5th floor, and there's 3 elevators, but only one of them works, and everybody's in line for it. And you've got the cart that one wheel doesn't work, and your stuff dumps over and dumps out all over the sidewalk. Maybe you've already had a drive that was stressful, and maybe everybody's hungry. It's not awesome, and it's not going to be awesome. And a lot of parents are like, oh, I'm just going to come early and like beat the rush. And then you get in line with all the other families that thought they'd come early and beat the rush. So the move-in day tends to be very stressful. So my advice to you for move-in day is to expect that and choose a good attitude, because your attitude on move-in day is the only thing you have control over. Also, move-in day is usually the day that you're dropping your kid off, and it's kind of the tone setter for how they start their college career. Like, you have to kind of think of what's the note you want to leave your kid on. Like, do you want to be all like pissy and irritated and mad because things didn't go how you hoped, and like you were hungry so you were hangry, and so the parents are arguing with each other and everybody's at each other's throat? Like, that's not the way to do it. It's really better to know, okay, this could be really difficult. Let's choose a good attitude, and let's try to make this as least stressful as possible. Okay, so just consider that. And you know what? If it's anything better than that, I just want you to like think in your mind, like, all right, cool. It wasn't as bad as Kyle said it was going to be. But I want to prep you for the idea that it might be horrible. Terrible weather, super busy, super crowded. I don't know, like, whenever they built most of the dorms, they were not designed for double wide futons moving up 5 sets of stairs. Like, it's not awesome. So get ready for that. Okay, so by the way, as we go, again, you can post questions or say anything that you want to in the chat. All right, so let's talk about homesickness. So homesickness is real. This is the part in the talk when I'm in a room full of parents. I ask parents to raise their hand. I say, who thinks their kids will be homesick? And, you know, half of the parents raise their hand and say, who thinks their kids won't be homesick? And the other half raises their hand. Truth is, we don't really know. I was probably considered a social butterfly, and I had tons of friends, and I was quote unquote popular in high school and all of that. And I went to Iowa, and I went to Prairie High School, and so my family and where I grew up was very close to home, and I was really homesick for the first semester. I hated college for the first semester, and it's mainly for the reason that I'm about to talk about next, which is the reason. Sometimes the reasons that parents think that their kids will be so successful in college are actually some of the reasons that makes them struggle at first. Not struggle completely, but struggle at first. So sometimes kids who are very socially successful in high school, they might struggle in college because they're losing a lot. If your kid has a really solid friend group and they're all going like their own separate ways, that's going to be really freaking hard. And a lot of times the new people that they're meeting in college, they don't measure up to the friends that they've had their whole life. And how could they possibly? Because if your kid has been friends with their friend group since junior high, like, how are these new kids gonna measure up to that? So I just want you to just take pause. If you feel like your kid's never met a stranger and they're a social butterfly and they're great in every social situation, like, awesome. I hope it all goes smooth. And there's definitely a chance that it will. But do keep in mind that that might actually be really hard, because maybe they're not used to having no one. Maybe they're not used to having fewer people. Maybe they're used to having that support system surround them. Maybe they've always known what to do, and they've always known who they were going to do it with, and now they don't. So keep that in mind. On the other end of the spectrum, I've talked to so many parents who are really worried that their kid didn't make friends in high school, and socially things weren't easy for them. And sometimes in college, kids who didn't seem to make strong connections in high school blossom. because they weren't able to find their people in high school because their people weren't in high school. There's a chance that just whatever the culture was where they went to high school, it just wasn't their group. And when they come to college, there are so many different kinds of people. And it's not the high school social game anymore. Iowa is too big to have the high school social game. There's somewhere between 30 and 33,000 students at Iowa. Like, the cliques go out the window. There aren't popular kids anymore. The groups that used to be like small niche groups are now huge, and nobody cares if anyone's you know, an athlete or a nerd or a jock or in band. Like, doesn't matter, because people gravitate towards what's a good fit for them much more than in high school, when high school is about conformity and college tends to be about finding who you are. And so if you feel like your kid didn't make good connections in high school and you're really worried about them in college, there's a chance that they're going to find people who they make good connections with, and that might surprise them as well. They might be like, I can't even believe there's people like me here. I can't believe there's people that look like me. I can't believe there's people that think like me. I can't believe there's people that behave like me. So consider that for your kid that hasn't made good connections. Also, it can be a blank slate when, if somebody's been in the same school system for years, like, things follow them. But when somebody comes to Iowa comes to Iowa City from any other town in Iowa, like, nobody knows that embarrassing thing that happened to them in grade school. Nobody knows those embarrassing stories. Nobody knows about the harsh breakup that they had early in high school. Nobody knows about how they were excluded from their friend group and shunned for this reason or that reason. Like, those things don't follow them as much. And if they follow them a little bit, then they actually tend to have a chance to be able to let them go, because there's so many people and folks don't care anymore. There's just too many people in the pool to care about trying to keep track of everybody's social story. So it can be a really neat way to start over. If your kid doesn't have any friends going to Iowa, they might meet a bunch of new people and it could be great. If your kid is coming to Iowa with a group of friends, it could go any way. Maybe they'll stay really close and be great, and there's a chance that those friend groups sometimes break up, and if they do, it's not necessarily even that bad of a thing. Sometimes friend groups integrate new folks, and sometimes friend groups, like, don't totally break up, but they do kind of disperse because each person is exploring new parts of themselves or making connections with folks that they weren't able to in high school. So there can be some excitement and some loss in that. So kind of keep that in mind. All right, so let's talk about grades. So a lot of parents don't like to hear me say this, but I always say it. When it comes to grades in college, B is the new A. A lot of times, kids who did really well in high school might struggle because they were smart and school came easily to them and they did not have to learn good study habits. And sometimes kids make the mistake of seeing their freshman year of college as the 13th grade of high school, and it is not. It's definitely not. And a lot of students' identities are wrapped up in their performance. And they've always been praised for how smart they were, how well they did on this or that. And sometimes that came with not that much effort. And so when they come to college, they realize real quickly, like, oh, I can't just like show up and just skate by on intellect. And some students will, and that's totally fine, but some won't be able to. So just consider, put some thought into before they go, how will you respond if your kid comes home and they haven't been as successful academically as both of you thought they would be? Now, I'm not saying not to, like, encourage them or push them or challenge them to do better, but do consider this, that if your student is frustrated with themselves, if they're feeling down about their grades, if they're irritated with themselves, if they don't know what to make of it, that's a time for you to support. That's not the time to come down on them and say, we just need to buckle down, because there's a chance that they've buckled down and even stretched the ways that they knew how to do that, and it still wasn't that good. So pay attention to their pay attention to their intention. If it's pretty clear that they are also disturbed by their grades, you need to support. Say, hey, you know what? This is just a whole new thing, and I have faith that you will be able to figure this out. And they will. That's not the time to say, oh, are you out screwing off with your friends? Oh, you're probably not putting in the time. Like, if they're not putting in the time, they probably already recognize that. So if you're lucky enough to have a kid that feels disappointed in themselves when they didn't do as well as they think, then just partner with them. Now, if you know your kid is not doing anything and not going to classes and they're not disturbed by it at all, then that might be the time to do some hardcore encouragement. But there's a chance that if you come down on a kid that's already like down on themselves because they're doing the best they can and they've never experienced this level of struggle before, that you're actually just going to be adding burden to them, when really what they need is a boost from people that care about them. And really, really, really encourage them to go talk to their professors and talk to them, encourage them to talk to their TAs, encourage them to find a tutor, encourage them to find other students in their classes that they could study with. I think a disservice that parents sometimes do is, and teachers do this all the time, not all teachers, but it's a thing that happens, that teachers will say, oh, and parents will say, just wait till you get to college. Like, they don't care about you. That doesn't matter what's going on in your life. If you don't turn something in, they don't care, da da da. And we make professors and TAs sound really unapproachable. And, maybe we've been guilty of motivating that way, but now it's time to flip the script, because that's not the case. By and large, most professors are very open and understanding. Now, that they're not fools. Like, they don't give kids just tons of leniency, but they're human, and they recognize that your kids are human too. So if your kid's struggling with something in their life and struggling in the class, and your kid reaches out to the professor and says, hey, I'm really sorry, like, I know that this paper is due tonight or tomorrow, but I need some more time on it. Can I please turn it in on Monday, or whatever the case may be? There's a very good chance that professor is going to be like, you know what? Thank you for letting me know. And they're going to let them have that time. And you know what? That's another set of skills. That's great. That's actually really good communication skills that you could, and self-advocacy skills that you could encourage your kid to use. So now's probably the time to back off of be successful in college. You want them utilizing every avenue they have, because I'll tell you what, other students are. And if you scare your kids so much that they're too scared to go talk to a professor, then you're putting them at a disadvantage, because other students are going and talking to the professors, and other students are getting that leniency and those little accommodations here and there, and your kid's competing against them. And also in life, I can't speak for everybody's working environment, but it's a healthier working environment if a person's able to reach out to a supervisor and say, like, hey, I care about this, I'm working as hard as I can, it's not going to come in exactly on schedule, I need this much more time. Like, in the working world, folks tend to want that communication as opposed to the die-hard deadline. So keep that in mind. One thing that I always touch on in this talk is the idea that more kids who come from more privileged backgrounds tend to feel more confident asking for help, and kids who come from less privileged backgrounds tend to feel less confident asking for help. If your kid feels comfortable asking for help, that's awesome, and I hope they keep that. But sometimes kids who feel self-conscious about their performance or about their identities, and they don't feel confident asking for help, sometimes those kids feel like they don't belong there. So, like, if a kid that comes from a really supportive and privileged background, if they start to struggle, they might start to look around and say, who's here to help me? But if there's a student who doesn't come from such a supportive background, to help me, a lot of times they start to think, I don't belong here. And so if you feel like your child comes from a less privileged background, I want you to know that you still have a lot to offer. You can be their biggest encourager and also compassionate ear. I want you to encourage them to ask for help. If you want your kid to be successful at Iowa, really encourage them to ask for help. Encourage them to talk to their professors, other peers, go to university counseling service, anything. Like all of the staff of the university should exist to help your kid get through the process. So a lot of people walk away from the university because they've made the assumption that they don't belong for one reason or another. So I just want to challenge that. Okay, so you might be laying in bed and get that call, 2:45 a.m. You answer the phone and you hear on the other end, I want to come home. What do? You know, if you get that phone call and they're crying and they're upset and they say, I want to come home, and you say, yep, absolutely, I have my backpack, my bag packed, I already had the car running, I'll be there in 3 hours, no problem. That might satisfy your need to be there for them. There could be a secondary message there that could be something along the lines of like, yeah, I was expecting you to fail and I didn't think you could do it either. So I really want you to put some thought into how will you support your child if they start to struggle. So the first thing I want you to do is listen to them. I just want you to listen. Spend all the time that you need to listening until they're calmer. Just listen until they're calmer. Don't go into problem solving, none of that. Just listen. Tell them, like, show them that you understand. Your job is basically to talk them down. Okay? You don't have to problem solve. Just be there to vent. Let them vent at you, to you, with you. And then you can say, we'll talk about it more in the morning. Okay? Now, I'm not saying don't ever let your kids come home, but I want you to think about it. Your goal, and this is not 100% of the time, this is a general statement. Your goal is to keep your kid in Iowa City. Okay? Maybe instead of bringing them home, you come to see them. And then you take them grocery shopping, you fill up their mini fridge or whatever the case may be. And it's totally okay to bring them home sometimes, but it can happen that turns into a pattern. And then what they're actually doing is they're not adjusting. And they're really just using coming home as an unhelpful coping strategy. So you're the parents, and it'll depend on what the situation is. You'll make whatever decision you make, and I fully respect whatever you decide as a family. That it might absolutely be the right thing to bring them home. But keep in mind, like, all right, is this something I can help them weather, or do they need to come home? And if they need to come home, go get them. I would never be dumb enough to stand between a parent and their child. I know you'll go get them if you need to, but do consider, like, maybe I should just go to them and spend the weekend with them, or maybe I can talk them through this and help them stay there, because you want to help build them up so that they feel like they can handle things that come up in life, because they're facing things without you. And you know, you don't want to be the parent of a 40-year-old, 15-year-old. That's not the goal. So you want to try to keep them on campus if you can, because they really need to adjust. And they're not going to be able to if they get into the habit of coming home constantly when they're upset. So homesickness is all about adjustment. You know, so we talked about homesickness. It's very real, and it's all about adjustment. And they're going to have to weather these storms. And the cool thing is, like, all right, so it's really hard as parents to watch them weather the storms, because we don't want to see our children in distress. But it's really neat to see how they come out on the other side and recognize that they were able to withstand things that they never thought that they could. They'll start to recognize their own strength, and that's a really good thing. Okay. So go ahead and type in the chat, what feelings come up for you as parents thinking about sending your kids off at the end of August? What's coming up for you right now? Nervous. Yep. I will be. Lump in the throat. Oh yeah. I've actually become desensitized to these talks. When they started asking me to do this presentation, I was a mess. I did most of this presentation with a lump in my throat, like thinking about my kids leaving. Okay, you can continue in there. So nervous and scared that they don't use their freedom appropriately. Right. So here's the thing, like it's still true in undergrad. It's true in high school, and it becomes less and less true as they get older, but it's more and more true as they're younger, that we want them to make their mistakes when they're young. You know, there's a chance that they won't use their freedom appropriately. Yep, that's absolutely right. And you know what? It would be it's really good for them to learn their lessons when there's still some semblance of a safety net. They're still connected to you in this way. When they live in the dorms, there's a community there. There's an RA that lives on every floor. You would be really surprised probably to hear, it's actually wonderful that students look out for each other. A lot of times it's not the RA that notices that a kid's struggling. It's somebody else on the floor that goes to the RA and says, hey, this other kid is struggling. Like, you need to go talk to them. The professors and TAs are awesome. Like, I've had so many professors and TAs say, hey, I'm worried about this kid in my class. What should we do? Da, 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 da. There's all kinds of structures within the university to help students. So you're right. They might not use their freedom appropriately, and stuff might come up in their lives that they don't know how to deal with. And we're really lucky that there is still a framework in place to help them and support them. So I'm not telling you not to be nervous about it. I'm just asking you to also keep that in mind, that there is a structure still in place. There still is somewhat of a safety net that can be there for them. Your relationship with your kids is changing from primary supervisor to consultant. It's more hands-off. You don't get to be in control anymore. They're not going to share everything with you, and there's going to be things that you don't want to know, and they're going to make mistakes. So your new goal is to make them want to tell you things by making them comfortable to do so. So the first time that your kid messes up or does something that you don't approve of or you disagree with, or like an accident happens or something, who knows what it'll be, the way you respond is going to set the tone for if they're willing to tell you the next thing or not. And so if you blow up at them and you aren't helpful and it's not a healthy response, how likely are they going to be to come to you the next time? That's something to consider. Now, you'll always keep your family values, and those are things you can always remind your kids of, and that's great. But remember, like, you don't have the heavy hammer anymore. Maybe some of you still feel like you do, and maybe you do, I don't know. But just keep in mind that you don't have your parental grapevine anymore. When I was little, somehow my mom magically knew every frickin' thing I did within 5 minutes of when it happened. I would get home at the end of the night like, holy shit, glad I got out of that. And then my mom's there, pissed. And I'm like, how did she know? The parental grapevine at College Community School District, everybody knew everything. Parents are just intertwined and entangled, and we're all from the same towns and go to the same schools. And, you know, maybe one of their teachers is a family friend, and your kid's going to school with like your friend's kids, and like everybody knows everybody. That's not going to be the case anymore necessarily. And so you're not just going to hear stuff through the parental community grapevine. So your kid is now going to be the primary source of information about what's going on in their lives, and you have to be approachable or they're not going to tell you. And if you feel like you make a mistake or a misstep, I just encourage you to go back and heal it and say, hey, you know what? Sorry that I lost my cool. I just care about you a ton. Like, come back and repair it. Like, maybe you didn't do horrible damage to it, but just consider that you want them to want to tell you. And that's going to depend a lot on how you manage stuff when it comes up. Don't use your kid as your confidant or outlet. Use your own family and friends. I've worked with a lot of students in my office, individual counseling, talking about how one of their parents or caregivers is so upset that they're gone and they're so lonely and all these things that might be very real and understandable. But don't put that on your kid. That doesn't need to trickle down to them. Not that you don't have to keep it from them 100%, but they don't need to be your main person that you talk to about why you're upset that they're gone, because you don't want your kid to feel guilty that they're off getting an education. It's hard enough transitioning to a new school, a new system, a new town, new absolutely everything, new streets, new apartment, all new people. That's hard. And then to have a parent saying like, I'm a mess because you're gone. Like I've worked with students who are guilty because one of their parents is so upset that they're gone. When it's okay for that parent to be upset, that's valid, but that parent should go to one of their own friends. And if that parent doesn't have that person, then that parent could consider finding a counselor or finding another avenue if it's via their own church, or if they could get involved in a group somehow or anything like that. But really encourage you to not put it on your kids if you're in distress. Now you can share some, but just don't burden them with it. Don't bog them down with it. This is always a tricky one. I'm actually kind of glad that we're doing this virtually so that nobody can throw anything at me. If you have a tracking app on their phone, I strongly encourage you to disable it. And that's a hard thing to hear sometimes. If you feel like if their tracking app doesn't turn into an unhealthy thing, then okay, maybe you keep it. But if you are pulling it up and looking at it constantly and it's bringing you anxiety and it's like the way that you still feel connected to them, you might not need to know that they were out and about at 2:30 in the morning. It might just drive you crazy. And the thing is, things that seem really crazy to you might be very, very normal in their environment. You might be like, where are they going at 2? This is crazy. This isn't safe. But if you were there, you would see that like hundreds of college students were out and about doing this and that. So put some thought into whether this might be the time to get rid of that tracking app or not. Like I said, if it's not a problem, okay, fair. But if you think that it might be a problem for either of you or both of you, then you might consider letting go of that. If your kid's in a long distance relationship or they're going to college, already having a partner, and you think you already know what's going to happen in that relationship, don't bother telling them. It never works. They're gonna let them work it out. Like maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. If it doesn't, there's going to be heartache, maybe for one of them. Be there to support. If you feel like you knew what was coming all along, then just prepare how you're going to support them. But if you think you're going to impart wisdom like, oh, hey, you should break up with them before you go, you can't predict the future either. So I really encourage you, let them live their lives, let them work it out, and you be there for support. Okay, so I know that we're already over time, so I'm going to wrap it up. So the last thing I'm going to wrap up with is the same thing that you're going to wrap up with, and that is to talk about drop off. So this is the time when all the stuff is done. You got up early and you packed the minivan or the SUV or the enclosed trailer or whatever it is, and you drove to Iowa City and it was hotter than hell, or it was pouring rain and it was all frustrating, and then you finally got it all done to move in, and then you like, oh, let's go to eat somewhere, and then you realize that every single place in Iowa City was packed, and that was frustrating. So maybe you went a little farther out of town than you thought you were gonna, and all of these things, right? And it's all done, and now there's nothing left to do but say goodbye. And so maybe you do the Midwestern goodbye where it's like, goodbye, I love you, and then you chat for a few more minutes, and it's goodbye, I love you, and it's chat for a few more minutes, and nobody wants to rip the Band-Aid off, and that's okay. But when it comes to drop off, I'm going to give you one message that I want you to impart if you don't know what to do. And all I want you to say to them is, I'm proud of you, I love you, you're going to do great. Okay? I'm proud of you, I love you, you're going to do great. Big hugs, maybe tears, okay. Get in the minivan, get in the SUV, get in the truck, drive home, bawl your eyes out, check their tracking app, maybe delete it, talk to your partner, call your friend, whatever you have to do. Anticipate drop-off's going to be sad. I hope it's happy. There's a chance it's like mixed feelings. The message you can use is, I'm proud of you, I love you, you're going to do great. And I truly believe that for all of you. Thank you very much for coming to this presentation. I'm going to put my email address in the chat one more time just to keep it like top of mind. If you if you have any questions, if there's anything that I didn't cover, certainly email me. Otherwise, here is the phone number for UCS. Our front desk staff is incredible. They are so experienced. I don't know how they know about all of the resources and offices in the university. Like, call them and say, hey, who do I talk to about this? Or I'm worried about this. Like, they'll get you connected with somebody. None of this is gonna like make this painless, but you can do some mental and emotional prep work, and don't allow yourself to only focus on the negative and nervousness, because there's also a lot of good things that are happening right now too. So thank you very much. I hope that you all have the best experience that you can, and I'll be excited to see your kids on campus.